Welcome to Beyond Sports with Paul and Jeremy. So, thank you guys for checking this out. This is the first time that we're doing a live YouTube video Zoom, and that noise is so annoying, man. What is that? What is that noise? Did you do that?
Yeah,
Please
man,
stop
it's
doing that.
energy. It's energy.
No,
That's
it's
energy.
in my ear. It's
That's the
really
excitement
loud
that
and
we
annoying.
got. Beyond Sports and Paul and Jeremy.
I'm quitting this, man. This is ridiculous.
Boop, 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 boop.
No, I'm out. Dude, that is way too loud in my ear. I don't want any of that.
Really?
I literally don't want any of it. No, for real. I gotta stop. All right. Let me see. Because that was like right in my ear, man. Like that was like
turn
the
it
worst
down.
thing I
How about
had.
this?
No, it doesn't even matter.
There
Will you
go.
stop? Really? Like that's the worst thing I've ever heard in my life, man. Like really,
Come
my
on.
ear right now is throbbing. I will literally delete this whole thing right now.
All right, do what you got to do, man. Do what you got to
Yeah,
do.
that
We
was
got to be
horrible.
exciting,
That
we
was
got to be
not
exciting.
exciting. Not exciting at all. That was the
Man,
worst thing
you're
I
a hater.
ever
You're
heard
the
ever.
worst improv partner. You just do not go with anything. You're terrible at improv.
Well,
You're
of
always
course,
shutting
if
people down.
somebody's coming to you and stabbing you in the side with a knife in the back, like you're not gonna keep going.
No
Like this is
excuses.
pinging in my
No
ear.
excuses. Just learn how to
Dude, this
support
is
your
horrible.
teammates. Yeah,
That's
learn how to
not
support your
support.
teammates.
I'm
That's
done.
not supporting you. You
All
undercut me.
right,
You
so
cut
let's
the
get to the
legs out
sports. Let's
underneath
get to
me.
the sports. Let's get to the sports, man. I don't have time for this one right now. All right, let's get to the sports. So, Beyond Sports with Paul and Jeremy, what are we talking about today? What is our focus?
We're talking about air horns. I think that's kind of where we
I'm
started
not.
with air horn. So we're talking about that, and we've had kind of COVID issues with the Olympics.
Yeah,
So
there has been
we've
these COVID
had
issues, right?
individual athletes. Individual athletes have been testing positive in
Hmm.
different sports, and we saw today Zach Lavine tested positive.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
where does that leave him?
Uh, he's probably out of the Olympics also. He didn't make the flight to Tokyo, which means that he's not starting with the team. I don't know if that means that he can't join at all, but I imagine that his time with the Olympic team is probably over, I would say as well. And I think that this is going to be an ongoing thing that we see with COVID in the Olympics because there's been multiple athletes that have tested positive for COVID in the village, right? In the Olympic Village. So what happens, right? They already are not allowing fans into the games. Now the athletes are getting having a COVID issue. Do we even see the whole Olympics? And what does this mean for the games themselves?
Yeah, I think people have been trying way too hard to get these Olympics together for the past year now.
Yeah.
They're not going to stop. They're not going to let it go. I mean, every athletic event that people have wanted to go on ever
Mhm.
since we started this whole lockdown thing, it's
Yeah.
happened. People have found ways to get around it. People have probably been suppressing positive tests. They've probably been massaging the different levels of athletes being infected or not or whatever. I
Mhm.
think when people want events to go on, they will go on. The Olympics is a huge economic opportunity. With fans, it's really big. This one's going to happen without fans. It's still going to be large because you still have sponsorships. You have a lot of commercials. You've already prepared the arenas. You've already basically prepared the athletes. Everyone's been ready for this
Mhm.
for a year. The show
Yeah.
must go on, right? So because the show must go on, they're going to find ways to do it. I don't feel like it's the smartest thing to do, but here we are. You have the athletes that are getting there. Like you said, athletes already
Mhm.
tested positive. Does that mean that they're out of the Olympics? Like, what does that mean? And we've already seen it. We talked about Coco Golf before as a promising young player. She tested positive. She's out of the Olympics.
Mhm.
What I don't get
Wow.
is what are they going to do? Do they have to do a 2-week quarantine? Is that kind of what would have happened anyway? How does that work? Like, why are they out of the Olympics now?
Yeah. I'm assuming that it is the 2-week quarantine, and I'm assuming that if they aren't a part of the whole thing, then now it leaves them in a situation where they can't be a part of it at all, right? Yeah, but I have to read a little bit more into that just to make sure. But I feel like this is one of those things. You remember when COVID started and they had the NBA bubble, and there was all this talk about players not being able to come. Like LeBron James had that whole marketing event type of thing where he was like doing like the liquor photo promo, whatever thing. And then you also had
Mm-hmm.
the famous strip club incidents with Lou Will and all these other guys, and that was something that played a role for these different types of teams and talking about the competitiveness as well, right? Some players weren't actually able to participate in the bubble. I think Zion got hurt. Also, like there were so many different things that happened where injuries, COVID played a part in the bubble, and it played a part. And I think how some people thought about the championship, right? That COVID season with the bubble always is going to have an asterisk next to it. Is that going to be the same situation with the Olympics? Are we going to see the same type of issues? Because this is not necessarily just NBA. It's not isolated. This is a global event, right? And because it's a global event, I think that there's a little bit more competitiveness with respect to like pride of a nation. You know what I mean? So I think that this could be something that's interesting to look out for, is how this affects not necessarily just basketball or tennis or whatever, right? I think that this could be something that could get messy, Oh, sorry. Jeremy, you
But
hear me?
here's what I
Oh, there
don't
you go.
understand. Yeah. Here's
Mhm.
what I don't understand. All right. The Olympic team, basketball team, their first game is the 23rd, isn't it?
I think they had their last one yesterday, and it's like 24 hours before pool play starts. So I think pool play starts on Sunday against France or something, they said. Yeah.
Okay,
So
okay.
so pool play is going to start pretty soon. Yeah.
So you mean like in 6 days?
Yeah. In 6 days. Yeah.
Okay. So how are they supposed to do a quarantine if they're only going to be there 5 days ahead of time? That kind of, I don't quite understand that, because that seems like Levine could make a quarantine, could quarantine, right? Like, I don't get it. He could fly on a separate flight and just, I just don't understand. Like,
Yeah.
always just
It's
saying that provided that no one tests positive, you don't have to quarantine, or is it based on vaccination? What do you know exactly the detail there?
um well, from what we're saying so far, it's just basically that I know he won't be able to participate in the different exhibition game, or uh, he won't be able to participate in some of the pool play for sure. But I think that's one of the things that we have to look up and see how the whole situation is going to take place. Because if I'm Zach Lavine, I haven't even been able to go to the opening part of the games. I haven't been able to really practice with my teammates, and now I have to make a trip out to Japan with the jet lag, and then also contribute for maybe a few games if my team makes it there. It changes around that whole dynamic, and I feel like with that and with other teams, like I said, or other countries, when you're talking about national pride, right? We're talking about sports that often don't necessarily get the same type of spotlight that they would outside of the Olympics. And this is a huge stage for a lot of people. And when you're considering gold medals in individual sports, that's huge. And if one person doesn't come there, then that can change around the whole Olympics. And Olympics, like I said, they're not necessarily just individual sports. It's a nation coming together to say, this is what we're producing. This is how competitive we are. And we want to be number one. I think that this is why it can get messy, is because it's not necessarily just the basketball part of it. It's just about this protocol and how are they going to deal with people that have any type of sickness throughout these events.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because that's why Bradley Beal's not going to participate, right? Because of
Yeah.
he was in health and safety protocols. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, kind of the timeline. So
Yeah.
everyone should have been in close contact to both of those guys, right? So like, I
Exactly.
don't I don't see how they pick and choose, but it's however they're going to make this happen, they're going to make it happen. So I wouldn't be too worried. We know they're going to play the Olympics. The level we don't know, the quality we don't know, but they're definitely going to play the Olympics. However they got to do it, they'll figure it out. So I think that also goes to injuries and stuff. You were talking to, if we're are we kind of concluded here, because you did want to talk about athletes hiding injuries too. I remember. I feel like those are kind of related, and not totally, but injured and people that can't play.
Yeah, I guess my take or my question for you is, how do you think outside of this, outside of just basketball, that this could affect the Olympics? Do you think that this could become a situation um, on more of a global scale, or do you think that this has a limited effect in that aspect?
I think that everyone will be affected, but like I said, I don't know how they're going to react to it because if they just take one person that tests positive and they isolate that one person and they just ignore everyone else that they've been around, then they'll just keep things moving. We also don't know who's been vaccinated. We don't know what the policy on testing vaccinated people. A lot of
Yeah.
places won't test vaccinated people, right? Like
Mhm.
universities are coming back now and they're like, we don't test vaccinated people. So a lot of those
I didn't know.
things,
Yeah, I didn't know that. I know that some schools said that they had to have people vaccinated before they could come back to school, and then they decided not to do that for certain schools and stuff. But I didn't know that they just didn't test vaccinated people because now you also have the variant strain, and we've said that even with the variant strain, um, people can still get it even
mhm,
if you have had the vaccination. So I don't know how that works as well. And again, this is why I say that I feel this could be something that turns into a very sticky situation because we don't even know what's going to happen with alternates, right? Alternates come. How does that work? Do they have to
yeah,
go through a protocol? Do they have to stay there? And in that time, like, what is the process? And I feel like
yeah.
because of that, it could really affect the overall Olympics in total because
It
now
hasn't.
some teams may not even be represented throughout sports.
Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. They should have been over there a week ago, right? Everybody should have just been there a week ago and just did a quarantine of some sort.
About a week ago.
Yeah, and then it wouldn't have been a problem, right? Like, but for some reason they wanted these exhibitions and everything, so they did that, and they're flying over there a few days beforehand. I'm
Mm,
assuming that they're going to treat the vaccinated people like they don't need to test them, and maybe the ones that tested positive or are out because of health and safety haven't been vaccinated. I'm assuming that that's happened, like because I have no other way to know that,
yeah.
and you can't really like divulge someone's medical information, so it's not
Mm,
like they're going to say so or not. So I think that it probably could have been scheduled better, but this whole Olympic thing kind of just snuck up, right? It just happened, and so it's going to go forward. So I
yeah.
don't
Yeah.
mind. I mean, I'll
Definitely.
watch the events and everything like that. And it's just like the NBA Finals last year. I think that after a certain point in the bubble, there were no more positive tests. And you're like,
Uh-huh.
you just know once they get to a certain point, they're not going to have any positive tests, right? Like they're just not going to have any. So it don't matter if they're not reporting them. It don't matter if they stop testing. There will be no more positive tests after the game start. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah. Definitely something interesting to look at. The other thing that I thought was interesting that I wanted to talk a little bit about is um, um, name, image, and likeness, right? And this is related to the NCAA. And I thought that before, when you asked me a question like, "Are there any downsides to this?" and I was like, "Well, maybe not necessarily. Players are getting paid." Um, and I think that that should be something interesting, whether their finances are taken care of or not. Like that's a totally different issue. But one of the things that I consider that might be an issue, how does this affect the play and the competitiveness between players, not necessarily on different teams, but on the same team? If you're a freshman quarterback is coming in and trying to take the starting spot from um, your senior quarterback, is that an issue? Is a senior quarterback going to stand for that? Is there going to be things that happen in that time? I thought that that was something that we could kind of touch on because when we're thinking about anticipating the future and talking about beyond just the sports aspect of it, right? These are the types of stories that I want to consider as well.
Yeah, I'm looking at this article on 24/7 Sports right now, and it's kind of I'm just trying to get a gist, like an idea of like what the rules are, and it basically says players can be paid, but be careful not to wear team gear in advertisements or go against your school's in-house rules. So
Mm,
it's kind of vague. So each school has its own rules, and this article also kind of has who's been paid what or whatever deals that they can figure out so far. I saw another version of this on CBS Sports that I think was a little bit more updated, but I'm still seeing some of these things. So um what I think is that yes, it should allow, I guess, some sort of rebalancing actually. Because if the money's right, it shouldn't matter where the player goes, right? So what I'm thinking is Alabama football can only pay one or two players. Like the football team won't be playing it, but there's, a couple businesses in the area or whatever, there can only be so many student athletes that are supported by the local businesses, right? So you got to get really creative if you're trying to lure people based on NIL payments, because you're really not able to necessarily pay them more than one way. The only way would be, I guess, if they were selling jerseys and things, but I don't know if that's against the rules or not. So
Yeah,
I
I
think
guess I'm
Michigan,
thinking. Okay.
I think Michigan said that they're going to have basically jerseys with the athletes' numbers and names on them. So I'm not sure if the university profits from that or the students do.
Mhm.
Probably maybe
Yeah.
the students get a cut of it or something. But if that's in play, then that I think that'll make it a more appealing to go to a big school. But otherwise, it's kind of like the Wild Wild West.
Yeah, and I think that that's my thing is that if you're at Alabama and say this NIL, I don't know if it has to be that person specifically that works with whatever, or if they can go to a advisor that tries to find them different types of markets or places to sell their NIL. But if you're a starting quarterback for Alabama, right? Say if you're a starting quarterback for Alabama, and you have a contract where you're supposed to make $1 million to sell your NIL to some company, and now you guys recruit the number one quarterback recruit in the country, and that person's coming and jeopardizing your starting job. With that starting job being eliminated, now not only do you lose a starting job, but now you also lose out on $1 million. And maybe they still have you there, maybe they don't, because who really wants the backup quarterback? Maybe you get 25,000 or 10,000 from some other place, right? Is that going to be an issue, right? Because that's more a specific type of example that is more realistic, not necessarily the going to this college compared to this college, but more about the marketing from team to team, because that could cause an issue is where I'm thinking about, or was what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, and we know that the transfer portal has been crazy lately. Everybody that can't start is transferring. So that's another layer on top of that, because now you're not starting and you're not getting the money that you want.
Mm,
So you you
yeah.
you transfer, and the people that are getting endorsement deals are going to be local deals. From what I've seen, they've been kind of local. So if I go to Pitt, I'll get like some local place in Pittsburgh that gives me a
Mhm.
deal, or
Yeah.
the guy in Iowa has one, and things like that. So maybe you transfer from the place where you're not starting to kind of a smaller school out in the middle of nowhere that doesn't have any star power, and you bring that star power. Now you're the guy who's doing the endorsements, right? You have a more lucrative opportunity because now you're a big fish in a little pond. So the transfer market is already going crazy. Maybe they have to make sure that they limit that. There's only so many transfers, but it seems like people
Yeah.
are more starting immediately now than they used to after transferring. So they probably have to make sure that they can clean that up and make sure that people aren't just leaving school immediately if they can't get the money that they want based on NIL deals. It'll take a year or two for us to understand how it really works, because it's
Mhm.
still really murky. We've seen
Yeah,
some
sure.
reports of people's deals, but we don't know all the details. We don't know how the schools are going to respond. We don't even
Mhm.
know if they can sell jerseys or not, right? Like, the whole
Yeah,
thing
it's
got tipped off by that Johnny Manziel thing where they were selling his number 2 jersey without his name on it. And like, is that going to get Johnny
did not
Manziel
know
money
that.
now? Right? Like, what is that now? Who knows?
Ooh. Yeah, I think that's one of the things, and I think that I'm glad that we're talking about this story now, because I know that it's going to develop in a lot of different ways. Or is there a number of NILs that you can use with different people? Are they going to limit it? Are they going to limit the amount? It's hard to say. Like, what are they going to try to do to smooth this out? Because uh, I think that this could get very, again, messy is another word to use, because we're talking about money, we're talking about marketing, and now we're adding in a new competition or a new competitiveness within the sports, or within college sports. And because of that, it could have a lot of different effects. And I don't even know if, like you said, a lot of these players the goal or the idea was that a lot of local people could use these players to market their brands, whatever. But is this going to be something that only stays local? Are there going to be other people that are trying to market them out of state as well? Right. There's so many different layers to this NIL that are going to be very interesting. And I know we're going to have discussions about this in the future. I'm very excited about them because with every new market comes new opportunities. And I think that those opportunities and where they lead are definitely going to be something that is going to be a storyline for the next 5 years easily, you know?
Yeah, and here's one thing that I'm kind of wondering about. All right, are we now replacing our higher paid endorsers with cheaper labor? Is that kind of what we're doing? So we have these people, and one of the kind of unwritten, unspoken criterion, one of the unwritten, unspoken criteria is that these players have large social media followings. So that's kind of, they're
Yeah.
already considered to be influencers, right?
Yeah.
So now we're just
Mikey.
taking these influencers and giving them a little bit of extra money to pitch our product. But if they were more well known, if they were bigger, if they had more demands, kind of, would they be able to charge more money? So we're now saying you can get paid for your likeness, your name, your image, and your influence. But are we going to now just basically kind of use them for what they're worth? Because a part of it is, in my opinion, if a person can get these deals, why does a person need to go to college? Right? Like, is it is being in college the only reason that these people are able to get these deals going forward with NIL laws, right? Is that's kind of a question for me, because if I'm famous enough to get a deal with PetSmart, like one of
Mhm.
these student athletes does, why do I need to be in college for that? Why do I need to have a college backing to have this deal with
You know,
PetSmart? You know? So
but
now
yeah,
are we, is it going to be to a point where now when people know that they're influencers and they're 16, 17, just get the deal, right? Just get the deal, you get the money, and now you're a professional famous person. Now you're like any reality star out there. You
hey,
know? I just
life
wonder,
happens, and it switches
right,
around things. Sure.
right. But I just, yeah, and I wonder how that's going to influence things, because that my one question was that, like, what's the point of them? These endorsement deals are not, this is not just a person selling his jersey, which to me is the only logical thing for NIL. But
Mm.
these people are endorsing like food companies like Smoothie King, PetSmart,
Yeah,
that Hersey Miller, who is endorsing a web app development company, I think, which has nothing to do with sports at all, right? He could do that without
exactly.
being in college. So what's like, how does that work? Like, is it now that they're just looking for famous people, but these people are famous for different reasons? So now we can do a deal with these famous people, but they
Yeah,
don't have to be like, they're not, it's not like I'm doing a deal with A-list actor, because now I can pay a little bit less, right? Now I can
yeah,
just like
it's
not have to
definitely
pay
going
as
to be
much for that thing.
interesting. So I think that initially, and like you said, this is why I say it can get messy. And I'll leave it at that, and we can kind of like start to close up. I know my battery's running a little short. This is a trial that we're trying out, so I'm glad that we got to check this out. Um, One thing that I think is the reason why I can get messy is because now these players don't really need to market themselves in game, right? We talked before about how players make money, right? So if you guys haven't watched that podcast, definitely check that out. One of the reasons is that they make money is because of marketing and marketing themselves. And we talked about how a lot of those players are basketball players or tennis stars or golf over football, right? Because you don't see the person's face in football. But if you're a football player, you're very well liked off of the field as well. You have a huge following, right? Now you're in a situation where you may be making more than the starting running back because no one knows what that person looks like, but they know you. So now you have 2 million followers and you're marking yourself, but you're riding the bench. It doesn't even matter, right? So now we're introducing something totally different into the sport. And I think that this is going to be a very, very interesting time. And I'm interested to see how it's going to get navigated because there's so many different things. Maybe we need to get somebody that's a lawyer on our show So any lawyers out there that like sports and want to talk about this NIL, where it
Yeah.
can get messy at, we're definitely interested in having you on. Just give us a little bit more talk about what this could potentially mean, because this gray area that's being introduced is very, very wide, and I think that it has a lot of ups for a lot of people. It's going to change a lot of people's life for the positive. And there's also going to be a lot of people that maybe it doesn't help out for different reasons, So I'm very excited to see where this goes. Any last thoughts on the NIL, these players getting paid, and the future of this with sports?
Yeah, I just think that it's wise to be a little cynical about what the NCAA does with respect to student athletes. So I think approach it with a little bit of caution. The
Mhm.
athletes get your money if you can, if you can get an endorsement,
Get your money.
but just be aware, because it's not just free money, right? There's going to be some sort of strings. There's got to something. You can't just completely dive into it. There's going to be something. So
Yeah.
I'm looking to see what the catch is, how they're going to actually work with this whole situation.
Okay. Sounds good, man. Yeah, I thought that was a really good, interesting part. I'm glad that we tried out this YouTube live. We'll see how the video is, how the video quality is. If it's really solid and we decide to kind of do a little bit more of this, be on the lookout for some of our shows. Again, we thank you guys for checking us out. Um, Anything else before we get out of here, Jeremy?
Yeah, I really like the air horn. I like how exciting that was in the beginning.
Nah,
So
man.
I'm gonna
You
make sure
can't
we
just
make
throw
that a
in new
permanent part of
things
our
like
show.
no, you can't throw
Yeah,
in new things
yeah.
like that. I will
Make
never
that a
do another
permanent part
show
of the
again.
show.
I'm
Yeah,
I'm telling you. You think I'm
yeah,
playing, man?
yeah.
You think I'm
It's gonna be beyond sports with Jeremy then. That's what it
Yeah, it's
is.
gonna be
There it is.
yeah, beyond sports with Jeremy, and
Yeah.
Paul's doing
Paul
his
moved
exit.
on to
So
better things.
yeah,
Paul moved on
forget
to
that
bigger and
excitement.
better
That was not
things.
exciting. That was
hmm
annoying and distracting. So forgive me
Obviously,
for being
obviously,
annoyed, but
you're not an
ooh, that
interesting person.
I am not an
You're
interesting
square, and
person with
that's
a
okay.
blowhorn in
That's
my ear.
okay. That's okay. Some of us need squares in our lives, I guess. Whoever
You're
they need
ridiculous, man.
squares in their lives, so that's good. But,
Hey, squares are building blocks, so I don't
uh-huh.
have any issue with
Uh-huh.
that. 3D squares.
Yeah,
Anyways,
exactly.
with that
Cubes.
said, this is Beyond Sports with Paul and Jeremy. I am Paul,
I'm Jeremy.
and thank you guys for listening to us. Have an awesome week, and we'll see you later.
All right.
Peace.